I just want to remind you that you have done a lot of really difficult things in the past that you underestimate a lot. And let me tell you, if you start thinking about those things, the little task or the little resistance or the little hindrance you have in front of you today will seem so minute in comparison. And that's why these things are really, really important to remind yourself of. We are in this world where we don't get enough credit for the hard stuff that we do just for being adults. And it's so normal. So everybody's like, yeah, of course I did that. Of course I picked up the groceries. Of course I went to the funeral. Of course I went to the dentist. Not of course. That stuff is emotionally very taxing and very hard and difficult and draining, but you did it anyway. And you deserve a bunch of credit for that because we all do so many hard things. Somebody needs to tell you that you did a good job. And I'm here to do that. I can tell you all day long. When you do those difficult adult things, you have proven yourself, you're capable, you're able to do hard things, you're willing to do hard things, and that can be transferred into anything in your life, anything at all. You can chop wood, you can work out, you can write a book. I don't care. Writing a book is a hell of a lot easier than going to a loved one's funeral. That's what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? So please, just get that into your head. A very good example that is a bit bleak, but I think is really, really helpful, is something really hard. Like a lot of people have been to someone's funeral. So somebody passes away, maybe someone close to you. It's so sad and dreadful, and you just have a lot of emotions. And on purpose, you go to a gathering of people in a church or in some, funeral home or something, where you know that it's going to be really emotional. It's going to be really tough to try to talk to people. You're going to go through that whole thing. But you did that on purpose. You put yourself in that situation to show respect, to meet the other people, and to kind of close a chapter in your life or whatever. But that was not easy. That was very hard. And you felt the morning of, you really didn't want to go. You felt sick to your stomach maybe. You were like crying, emotional, like you didn't want to go. But then after you went, it probably felt better. It probably felt like, or at the very least, you could say you were there. Maybe you didn't feel better at all, but at least you were there. You did the thing you said you were going to do. Maybe you don't feel better, but at least you have self-respect that you did that thing, and that was hard. That is an extreme example because that's very hard. You in your life have been through so many situations that have been so incredibly difficult that when you get through them, you almost like, how did I survive that? How did I do that? How did I not cancel that appointment? And take that now when you're struggling with a smaller thing, like a creative thing, taking time to practice your hobby, taking time to go and exercise. These things seem small, but the resistance you face, the wall that you have to break through to get to the thing, can sometimes be as challenging emotionally as the big traumatic thing, like the funeral or the dentist. Or you see how those are related? They're not the same thing, but our brain is so creative. It comes up with these like, oh, scary feelings so that we don't do the thing. But be encouraged by the fact that you have done some really stressful, quite horrible things before, like sitting exams, getting your driver's license test, breaking up with somebody. The list goes on. You underestimate the fact that you've done all those things. You survived. You did great. And I think we give ourselves way too little credit for that. And people might not give you enough credit for that, but that's not their job. That's your job. You have to encourage yourself. If you're going to wait for somebody else to be like, oh, good job, you did so great going to the dentist. We had that luxury, some of us, when we were kids, that our parents did that for us. But now we have to do it for ourselves. I can help you, of course. I'm here. I'm reminding you of this. But inside of your own head, you have to remind yourself, like you did some really difficult stuff, very concrete stuff. Like be very specific. Remind yourself, which thing was the hardest for you? Because for one person, it's going to the dentist. For another, it could be the driver's license thing. That was the most emotionally draining and difficult. It gave them mad anxiety for some reason. This is a very individual thing, but only you know how difficult that was for you. But you did it anyway. So you have proved to yourself in the past you are more than capable of doing very uncomfortable things, which means a procrastination, when you put it next to that big thing, you, by comparison, you see that, okay, I can logically see this is not as hard as going to a funeral. That makes it logical. That makes it rational. I can totally break through this thing. I accept that it's uncomfortable, but I can do it. And I don't have to convince you that you can. Because that past thing that you went through that I was talking about, the hard thing, you already did that. So you can't argue with me that you can't break through procrastination because you already did. So that's the trick, you see. I don't have to convince you of anything. I just have to remind you of what you already know. That you are quite capable of doing scary things. That you are quite able, that you have everything at your disposal that you need to break through that kind of like, I don't want to do that thing, or I don't want to stop scrolling and start doing. You can. Absolutely you can. But you have to remind yourself that you are much, much stronger than that kind of uncomfortable feeling, that kind of friction that you feel when switching from one thing to the other, or when trying to start a new activity. Because that's what procrastination is. It's like this like uncomfortable emotional push inside of you. Your brain is kind of like trying to stop you from doing the next thing or changing activity. That's just like a kind of a reflex we have to try to keep us in the comfort zone. There is a lot of science and research on what happens in our brain with procrastination, but that is not my field of study. So I will link some things in the description box for you that you can go and have a look at. Because it's important to learn about this stuff. What is actually happening? Why is it hard to do something I want to do? Like, I want to draw. I want to work out. I want to do these things. Why do I feel like this uncomfortable?
I don't want to do that.
So reading a little bit about the science behind procrastination and the psychological things that are happening is extremely helpful, because it makes it concrete, it makes it universal. You understand this is not you, this is human beings. We as a species do this. So you don't feel so weird about having these like strange feelings, because a lot of people label it as laziness, and they internalize and oh, I'm a lazy person, that's why I don't do the things that I want to do. No, you're a human being, and human beings as a species have these mental tendencies to pump the brakes when we meet that feeling of procrastination or resistance. It's almost like an alarm system goes off, like, oh no, I shouldn't do that thing. I should just stay on the couch and be safe. And it's not you as an individual. You are not lazy. There's nothing wrong with you. Human beings as a species have a tendency to procrastinate. It's kind of like this survival, protection, self-protection mechanism in our brain. Read the science in the description. I'm not a scientist, but I will link something for you. You're not special. This is not just you. This is human beings. And that's why it's so interesting to learn about the science behind it, because you don't have to blame yourself as an individual saying it's your personality, like you're lazy. You're not. You just have a tendency as a part of the human species to procrastinate. There's no reason to take it personally, but you have to deal with it in your own life, like I do too. That's fine. But don't worry about it. It's nothing personal. It's just human beings are like this. We just have to find a way to deal with it. And the science can help us understand how to manage this. I also want to add that one of the best things I've ever read about procrastination was written by Steven Pressfield in the book War of Art. So there's a classic called The Art of War. That's different. The War of Art. It talks about the battle of being entrepreneur or an artist, self-employed, something like that. So somebody who has to do the work themselves without too much outside encouragement. And the first chapter of that book is dedicated solely to the issue of procrastination. He calls it resistance. I call it that too because I've read his book. But this little chapter at the beginning of his book only takes about 10 minutes to read. And it is the best thing I have ever read on this subject. It boils it down and explains the phenomenon and how to deal with it perfectly. Much better than I have in this video. This was more to encourage you and to make you realize that you have the power to beat procrastination much more than you think. But what he writes there is so to the point, so short. You could read it to yourself every morning for 10 minutes and be reminded until it sticks in your head. And it's beautifully written, so simple to understand for anyone. And it is the best thing I've ever read about doing stuff on your own accord and by your own skill and motivation without too much outside encouragement. So I will encourage anyone to read that book by Stephen Pressfield, specifically the first chapter. If that's all you read, if that's all you get through, please. It will help you for the rest of your life on how to get started with stuff that matters to you, like hobbies, creative endeavors, or even like business if you work for yourself. That whole thing. Procrastination is the same emotion all over the board. If it's professional or hobby, doesn't matter. The resistance, the procrastination we have to get through feels very much the same. So his book is relevant to everybody. I hope this was encouraging. I hope I reminded you that you can do really difficult things. I'm sorry to bring up the whole funeral and the dentist thing. I didn't mean to bring that up. I'm sorry. But you need to hear it sometimes. We are in this world where we don't get enough credit for the hard stuff that we do just for being adults. And it's so normal. So everybody's like, yeah, of course I did that. Of course I picked up the groceries. Of course I went to the funeral. Of course I went to the dentist. Not of course. And when you get a little bit down on yourself, you can come back to the video and watch again. And I can tell you again how great you are and what fantastical, scary things you have survived. So just take that with you, put it in your pocket, and I'll see you next time. Bye.